exciting to have you all in. Just before we get started, I would like to remind you guys the event is being recorded, and if you would not like your image or face on YouTube online, either reach out to myself or Josh, and we'll have that part of the video blotted out. Just for it's not a lot of people out here today, but for new faces, I'm really happy to have you guys here. .NET Liverpool, the community, it's a pretty small one, but at the same time, it's quite big. We've been going on for about 7 years now. We hold this event it's not every Tuesday, so mostly Tuesdays, a month. It's a community for developers, but not just for developers, basically for anyone interested in the digital space in the Northwest. There are not a lot of these in the Northwest, but this is like one of the most consistent and has been for quite a while. And the community's continued progress has been thanks to efforts of our hosts and coordinators, myself and Josh at the back included. A lot of you might have met Chris and Sarah as well. They're currently not in attendance today. Anyways, the continued meetup is also sustained by a couple of sponsors, some of which are the Barclays Eagle Lab, currently donating, should I say donating or giving out this venue for the events. They've been giving out this venue to us for about a year now. It's a really nice place. They also are basically a digital business firm. So if you do have a digital product investment ideas you're interested in, you'd like to have a chat with Lily, either scan her barcode, get in touch later, or contact either of us and we would get that to you. If you are also in the market for a new position, you could reach out to Alex. He runs Hyperloop. Hyperloop is a recruitment company in the Northwest. So they do recruitment for senior positions, not just within the UK, but also internationally as well. And finally, currently, we have we've been sponsored by SNA Academy. So they're basically an apprenticeship organization company. So for junior developers, apprentices in your organizations, you're trying to onboard developers, run apprenticeship programs within your company. You could reach out to SNA Academy and they handle most of the ups and downs that go with that. Uh, Finally, JetBrains, as most of you already know, we do JetBrains product license giveaway every meetup. This meetup, we do have 2 licenses to be going out. So all you had to do, I believe most of us have already scanned the barcode and done the survey on the website. We do a raffle draw at the end of the talk and give out a JetBrains license for any of their products. It's not just limited to IDEs and development products. They do have a range of products I don't think it's on here, but I think they do also have like products for like data analysis, product management, and a couple of interesting stuff to be honest. And you could use license for any of that. So give that a go if you do win it. Also, please do check our website for upcoming events. We keep it updated for all our events going forward. And also, we also have a newsletter going on now. We are not spamming information. It's basically we send out like a couple of articles once a month or once in 2 months ish. So please do sign up. Finally, in case of an emergency fire, please make your way through those doors, down the set of stairs you've come up through. The doors you've come in through, their fire exits. And access point, I think, is actually don't know. I have to ask, but do make your way out the door first of all. And I'll be handing over to Peter now. Cheers, guys. And just this, if you want to click it on. So, maybe here might go. Let's go.
So does it open up?
And see.
So,
Yeah.
because that's the thing, I'll break it if it doesn't.
Right.
Just here. Perfect. Excellent. Thank you very much. Great. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. It's been a fabulous day, by the way. Thanks for arranging for the nice hot weather. It was a bit warm. It was still nice when I came down from Newcastle this morning, but yeah, it was absolutely fabulous here. So I've really enjoyed my day so far. So I'm Peter Bull, and I'm a .NET developer. I live in Gateshead in the northeast of England, and I've got over 3 decades of personal experience as a developer and 2 decades of professional experience. I got in a bit early before I could actually get a job doing it. And I've also a Microsoft MVP for .NET and Windows development as well. So I've got some experience that includes like web development. So I've done legacy ASP.NET. I even did classic ASP before that, right up to modern ASP.NET and Blazor. I've also done mobile as well. So I did Windows Phone when that was a thing. So if anyone used Windows Phone, I had one of the first 1,000 apps on that platform. So I was a very early adopter and obviously very disappointed when that kind of didn't work out. But I've also done a little bit of .NET MAUI, but I've also done desktop stuff. So I've done desktop in .NET all the way through from Windows Forms, which was the first sort of technology, to WPF, which is Windows Presentation Foundation, which is like a XML-based UI platform, to UWP, which was like the big deal, let's bring everything together, and then let's not do that anymore, which was Windows App SDK, which is the latest for building applications on Windows. I've also created my own open source NuGet packages, including assets and toolkits for .NET developers and Windows App SDK developers. So you can check them out at commences.com. I also write articles and host my own podcasts. The next episode is actually out on the 1st of May, and it's about GitHub Copilot. But there's episodes about other Microsoft technologies and .NET as well. And you can find out about those at rogueplanetoid.com. And if you want to learn something new about .NET, including Windows App SDK, how to build your own widgets as well, which I cover in a workshop there, then you can go to my website, tutorialer.com, where you can get workshops, tutorials, and some short talks as well. So today I'll be talking about Windows widgets, that's why we're here, how to design them with adaptive cards, and how to actually develop a widget provider as well. I'll also be talking about how you can use generative AI to actually create those adaptive cards. So you can just basically ask the AI to do it for you. And also how you can leverage generative AI in your widgets as well. I'll demo that. So I'll actually show off basically creating some widgets using generative AI. So we'll see how that goes. And then finally, I'll finish with a summary and a chance to ask any questions. So Windows widgets, let's start there. So Windows widgets are a feature of Windows 11, which is Microsoft's latest and most powerful operating system. And that helps developers, consumers, and businesses get more things done. There's features added such as Snap Assist, which helps keep your Windows in check. There's also other features as well, such as improved Microsoft Store, so you can have access to more entertainment features like movies, TV shows, and also focus sessions as well. So you just want to get some coding done, you don't want to be distracted. You can use that feature, and it can also integrate Spotify as well. So if you just want to listen to some great music while you're coding and not be distracted, you can do that. There's also Microsoft Copilot, which can kickstart your creativity or act as an intelligent assistant. And there's also Copilot Plus PCs, which enable more local AI functionality, including Recall, which is finally launched. So you can now use Windows Recall in preview, and a few other features that are lit up for those particular PCs. So if you've got a Copilot Plus PC, you can leverage more AI functionality on your actual machine. And then widgets themselves, those enable quick and at a glance access to information. That could be news, weather, like the weather is today, and even share prices. And you don't have to open an app or web browser. You can just have a quick look at the widgets board and see what's going on. And if you want to find out more about the latest hardware features that are in Windows 11, anything else that's coming, like Copilot Plus PCs, you can visit windows.com. So widgets themselves, as I said, they enable quick and easy access to information. You just either click from the bottom left-hand corner of the taskbar, or you can mouse over there, and that will display any widgets. There are first-party widgets that are built in, but you can also download and install third-party widgets from the Microsoft Store. Widgets can be customized based on your interests. So some widgets might allow you to put in your location to get more location-specific stuff like the weather here rather than somewhere else. And you can also put any preferences or anything you want to display. So you can basically make that information relevant to you. Widgets themselves can be interactive, so you can actually engage with the content directly within a widget, or content can be dynamic with real-time updates. You can see the latest news headlines or the latest weather, like I said. Widgets allow you to do like data visualization in like a nice small package that's easy to understand. And they can also integrate features from Windows as well, like notifications. So you can actually trigger a notification, for example. You can access any of the features that would normally be available in a Windows application from a widget. And widgets themselves are designed with adaptive cards. These can be updated partially, so you can use data binding to basically update part of an adaptive card, or you can actually completely replace the whole thing with another adaptive card. So you can completely replace the UI of a widget if needed. So adaptive cards, let's talk about that. That's what's used to actually design the look and feel of a Windows widget. So adaptive cards are platform agnostic snippets of UI, basically JSON. So it's basically a JSON file that describes a widget, and that can actually be used across other platforms as well. So the same technology can be used in Microsoft Teams. So you can have Teams to show adaptive cards with the same kind of functionality as a widget, or you can even use Viva Engage as well, and that supports the same technology. So it's used in a few different places, but used for widgets mostly. Um, Adaptive cards are used to exchange that at-glass content, and they can support text. They can even support images and even video, and you can have different layouts as well. So you can build reasonably complex layouts, such with columns and tables. As mentioned, they can be updated dynamically. So when a user actually does something with a widget, you can have it update as needed, or when any data changes to ensure that the widget's displaying the latest information it should be. The actual widgets themselves can be designed with a drag and drop designer. So there is actually a designer that you can use where you can basically make your own widget rather than using generative AI. Or there's a schema as well. So you want to go pure JSON, you certainly can. There's a full reference guide of all the elements that are supported. So you can basically build that yourself. But you can find out everything you need to know about building adaptive cards at adaptivecards.io. So the adaptive cards designer, that can be used to create your adaptive card visually. That's the card structure. So you basically can drag and drop the elements that you need right on, and that can be containers and any elements and inputs. The adaptive card designer allows you to see what that'll look like. So the various supported platforms where adaptive cards are used other than widgets, you can see what it's like. But if you select the widgets board, which is where widgets will be displayed, you can then see exactly what your adaptive card would look like as a widget. That includes in the different themes. So widgets support theming, just like Windows. So you can have dark theme widgets or light theme widgets. And it can also be small, medium, or large as well. So the user can resize, can choose those different sizes. You can support one or all of them. So in the designer, you can see what that would look like. And then you can set any properties in the designer. So you want to change something like the text of a button or whatever a label is, or the data context for data binding. All of those things can be done. Any layouts or styling. There are limitations of what you can do, but you can change all of those things right in the designer. So you can see exactly what your widget would look like. And you can even control the visibility of elements as well. So you can have an interactive element where it makes something disappear or appear when the user does something. So you've got that kind of flexibility. There's also the card payload editor. So you can actually paste in some JSON. So if you did do your own JSON, you can paste it in, make sure it displays correctly. And you can also use sample data as well. So you want to test out the data binding, you just provide some JSON data, and then you can tweak it till it shows the information you need. Then when you build your widget, you just have to deliver that same data and it'll work. And the designer itself, where you can create new cards and there's samples as well. So you can just take a sample and tweak it. You can do all that online at adaptivecards.io/designer. The schema, so if you want a bit more of a challenge, that's where the structure of the JSON can be is basically defined in the documentation. The documentation is excellent. It tells you what all the schema elements are, what they do. So they include text block, for example, rich text block, and text run for text. There's also image for graphics, so you show any kind of images. Or there's media, media source, and even caption source for videos. So you can actually show videos in widgets and even support subtitling with SRT files if you want. Containers can be used to arrange things in a widget. And you can also have things like a column, which is called a column layout, table. There's also a fact and fact set. That's like key value pairs. You want to show like a couple of things together in a list, then that would be the one you would use there. You can also have actions as well. So you can toggle the visibility of an element and then then have a target element for that. That allows you to make things visible or invisible. So you could show an input, and you can also submit any inputs from an adaptive card as well. So what are the kind of inputs you can have? You can have text, number, date, and time. And there's also choice and choice set as well, which are basically like radio buttons for being able to submit any values from an adaptive card to a client, which would be a widget provider, for example. There are also some types supported, not too many, but one key one is background image. So you can actually customize the look and feel of a widget. So if you want your widget to have a completely different background, maybe to theme for your branding, you can have an image that's loaded, and that can then make the widget look completely different. But if you want to have a look at the schema yourself, you certainly can. You can just check out adaptivecards.io/explorer. Any questions about that so far? Cool. Okay. All right, let's talk about a widget provider. This is where we can develop the actual thing that will provide our widget that we've built in Adaptive Cards using Windows App SDK, which is the platform for developing modern Windows applications. So Windows App SDK is the platform for designing applications which take advantage of the latest functionality in Windows. And you can use, and this uses WinUI 3 for components. So that leverages the native UI stack in Windows. So the controls will look exactly correct. The controls in your app will look identical to the controls throughout Windows 11 itself. And you can leverage all the latest functionality, like I said, including Windows Widgets. Windows App SDK is actually decoupled from Windows, so it's not integrated in Windows, doesn't depend on Windows updates. It's actually delivered separately through NuGet, and it's updated every 6 months. So there's new functionality and new features being added all the time. And then there's a release every 6 months where that will contain the latest functionality. I think 1.7 is the current latest version, with 1.8 probably coming out in the next few months. Again, each is adding more and more functionality, not just for like widgets, but for other things in Windows as well to bring it up to other technologies. Windows App SDK can be installed quite easily. You just install it with the Windows Application Development workload for Visual Studio. So you do need to use the full version of Visual Studio. And you just create what's called a WinUI 3 in desktop app. So that's the project type. That is your Windows App SDK application. Now you can develop apps like a widget provider with Windows App SDK using either C++ and Win32 if you prefer that, or you can use C# and .NET. So if you want to find out more about developing apps generally with a Windows App SDK, that can include using C++ or Win32 or .NET with C#, then you can go to aka.ms/WinAppSDK. You can see all the different features you can leverage there. So let's talk about actually how you would implement a widget provider. So Windows App SDK applications can become a widget provider by implementing the key methods from the iWidget provider and iWidget provider 2 interfaces in the Microsoft.Windows.Widgets.Providers namespace. So iWidget provider itself, that includes an activate and deactivate method. So that's basically when the widgets board is interested. So you'll get the activate call when the widgets board wants something from your widget. And when the widgets board is no longer interested in any updates, it'll send you a deactivate one. So that way you can shut down any connections, stop doing anything you need to do, and you can resume them on activate. So your widget doesn't have to be just sitting there doing stuff when it's not actually being looked at. But that's optional if you don't want to do that. iWidget provider also contains a create widget and delete widget. So that's when a widget has actually been added. So create widget will be when a user adds the widget to their widgets board. Delete widget is when they've removed it. So again, that allows you to set everything up for your widget for the very first time or clean everything up when they've removed it. There's also an on action invoked event. So that's when an action has occurred. So when one of those things has happened that a user submitted, you'll get an on action invoked event. And there's also an on-widget context changed event, which is when the size is changed. So you can have like flexible layouts that basically change, like a responsive layout. So it could be a responsive layout that resizes from small, medium, or large. But you could actually have a different adaptive card for all three. So you could basically handle that event, send a small card, a medium card, large one, and they could look different. So you've got the flexibility of either having responsive ones or ones that are completely replaced. Finally, there's the iWidget Provider 2 interface because some more functionality has been added to widgets since launch. And this includes just the on customization requested event. So that's when a widget supports customization. So some widgets will have an option on their sort of 3 dots bar to customize them. That's the event you'll get. And you opt into that as well. So you can basically want to have like a customized option to change some settings, like where the user lives for the weather, for example. That's how you would do that. You'd respond to that event, swap it out. When they're done, swap it back. But if you want to find out more about how you can develop a Windows a widget provider for Windows 11, then you can go to aka.ms/widget dev docs, and that contains all the information you need to build a Windows widget. There's also specifications as well, how to design them, best practices, things to avoid. So if you want to kind of have a general idea of how to build them, that's the place to go to. But building those widgets and following that can be a little difficult. There's a lot of complicated low-level COM stuff and loads of things that are way too complicated. So let's make that a bit easier. So you can actually become a widget provider by leveraging my own package, my commences.toolkit.windows app SDK package, and that wraps all the functionality that Microsoft have implemented to build a widget provider, so you don't have to worry about it. So you don't have to worry about COM or anything, you don't even have to know what that is. Basically, you can take advantage of all of this. And that's done with my widget provider base class. And that takes all the methods from iWidget Provider and iWidget Provider 2 and provides them in an easy .NET way. So you don't have to worry about what's going on underneath. That's all hidden away from you, so you don't have to worry about it. Because it can be a bit difficult to get started. So there's also some additional methods just to make things a bit easier. So there's an add widget or update widget methods that allows you to register your widget as a widget provider. So when your widget provider starts up, it needs to advertise the fact it's a widget provider. So there's a method for that. And there's also an update widget as well. So that allows you to do the updates you need to do. So you need to replace the adaptive card. That's what you'd use. You need to send some new data. That's what you'd use. All the things you need to do to change that widget, that method supports. You can send whatever you need to using that. There's also a widget base class as well, which just makes implementing widgets themselves a bit easier. So that base class basically takes those methods so you can use them inside your widget itself. So you can respond to those activate, deactivate, all those kind of methods inside your widget itself. So it makes that process a lot easier, abstracts away all that complicated stuff so you don't have to worry about it. And you can find commences.toolkit.windows app SDK on NuGet, but you can also get full source code along with an example widget, so you can just get up and running right away via commences.com/packages/toolkits. Right, let's talk about generative AI and how we can use that to design an adaptive card and leverage it as well. So generative AI, there's basically free ones out there, many of them, but I'll just pick two. So ChatGPT, that uses a AI-powered natural language model, which was created by OpenAI. I'm sure you've probably all used ChatGPT at some point. And it also forms the basis of Microsoft Copilot as well, which is kind of their extension of that same technology. And you can use it for anything. You use it for new ideas, creating content, streamlining tasks, whatever you want. These models have been trained on large data sets. They contain a lot of different kind of information. So that's generally text, but it can also be images or other types of content, data types and things like that. And the AI can learn the patterns and underlying structure of this data when gathering that, which you can then fine tune with prompts. So you'll know that if you haven't quite got what you wanted, you can fine tune that with a prompt to basically get what you want. Then you can basically use that to generate any new content. So you can create new content such as images or text that can be tailored to specific themes. And that can take advantage of all that knowledge that was brought in with those data sets. ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot, they can simplify tasks as well. They can break something down and make things a lot easier. And they can also provide a lot of information to help anyone with anything they might need to do. And one of those things is to create the layout for an adaptive card, because you're building that JSON schema, you're using the drag and drop designer. Why don't I just ask ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot to create my adaptive card for me, just with the layout I want, and out comes the JSON. I don't have to do anything. So that can make that process a lot easier. But you can try it out for yourself. And you can do that by going to chatgpt.com for ChatGPT or chat.com. Or you can visit copilot.microsoft.com and you can try that with any prompts if you've used it already and with some more specific adaptive card ones that I'll show a bit later. So for developers, basically this is the OpenAI platform itself at openai.com/API. And that provides developers with API access to all the OpenAI models. So that allows you to build applications that have natural language and other AI-driven capabilities. That's taken advantage of with the Azure OpenAI service, which you can find at aka.ms/AOAI service. And that allows developers to take advantage of all those OpenAI models, but you can also fine-tune models with your own data with Azure AI Foundry. Then, if you just want to try them out, you can use GitHub models at github.com/models, and that allows developers to play with all the OpenAI models for free. There's just some limitations for rate limits and stuff, but you can also try out other models as well, the non-OpenAI ones as well. So you can play around with those with just some usage limits, but that allows you to get up and running right away. You just need a personal access token from GitHub, and that's it. And then you can connect and use those models. And how do you do that? So you can take advantage of the Microsoft.extensions.ai library. It's basically a unified set of abstractions that standardizes integration of AI services, not just from OpenAI, but others, and for language models and embeddings for .NET developers. Now, this is currently available in preview, but you can use it. You just have to install it from NuGet. Microsoft.extensions.ai, that provides a standard set of API interactions. So you can use those throughout your application, but for different services if need be. And those common tasks are implemented there, and it's also being updated with any new tasks that are developed and any new functionality in AI as it comes out. But you could also integrate other services such as caching and telemetry as well. Microsoft.extensions.ai currently has implementations for OpenAI and Azure AI Inference. So those are for models that can be used from Azure OpenAI or GitHub models. And you can also use Ollama for Llama models as well. So if you want to do anything locally, you can leverage those. And Microsoft's goal is actually to provide standard implementations for all the AI services. So any developers there, if you develop your own libraries for any of the other OpenAI, like any of the AI services that are out there, you can implement these abstractions, and then that allows other .NET developers to leverage that AI functionality in their application using the same code. So again, all those different ones, there's probably a new one coming out all the time. You could basically implement a new implementation for that one to add to the existing one. So Microsoft are open to that and are actually actively asking developers to do that. Right, so let's talk about, not enough, that's enough talk. Let's actually see what it's like. Any questions at this point before I go into the demo? Have you either understand it or bamboozled you, or hopefully not the latter. Right. Okay, so I'll just get the browser up. So it probably doesn't quite show quite well on here because everything's quite big. So, but this is the designer. So we've got our card here. I'll just use this because it's not working there. So select the widgets board. So you can see there, albeit it's a bit small, but I'll move this out of the way. And we can change the size to medium. So we can see our widget. This would be our widget. It's just the basic one. So we've got the different things we can drag across. We've got the different values here. So this one's using data binding. So I think I could change this and it would probably update. There we go. So I've just changed the domain name. So the data binding is updating in real time, if anyone didn't catch that. So again, we can test it out with just this. This might be fine, maybe this will do, but we can also tweak it. So we can click on the various text blocks. You can see we've got these kind of expressions. These are the data binding expressions, basically dollar. Then we've got some braces, and then that path effectively matches the JSON data. So you've got data from an API, you could actually just tweak that expression till it matches where. So you don't have to have the JSON doesn't have to be in a particular way. As long as it's well structured, you can probably bind it quite nicely to that. But you can create a new card easily enough. So you can create one from a schema as mentioned, but there's loads of different template ones. So if you just got an agenda one, you could do that. But there's loads of different ones like flights. If you want to do delayed flight app, you could start with one of these widgets. We can also see the dark theme as well. So we switch to dark. That's what the card would look like in the dark theme. So again, that's all handled for you. Everything's inverted. So you don't have to worry. We can see the structure here. So there's this JSON structure. And it might be a little bit small, but we've got our type for adaptive card, and we've got a body, and that contains all the elements. So we've got the title, which is here, and then we've just got various other things as well. So, but what we can actually do if we want to get more details is we've got the Schema Explorer, which is what I mentioned. So this contains all the elements that are supported by adaptive cards. So you want to find out about text block, you can go in there and find out exactly what it supports. It supports color. So that's great. The colors are limited. There's only certain colors you can't have every single color, but there are certain colors that you can pick from. And then we can also see things like image as well. So images can be from URLs, but they can also be from base64 encoded resources as well. So you could actually have a resource in your application that you express as a base64 image. So it doesn't have to be a remote URL, but generally it is. Also, widgets need an internet connection, even if they're completely offline. So if I disconnect myself, I wouldn't actually be able to see any widgets. So they do need an internet connection. Even if your widget doesn't need an internet connection, the widgets board does. So that's just something to bear in mind. But we can see all the different things that are supported. So we've got tables. And again, you can see everything here. So you can pretty much go through all of these and pretty much understand whatever you need to know. But it's a lot to think about, obviously. You've got to learn another JSON schema. You got to, use the design. The design is nice. You can put something nice together. You can even take something that's already been generated out there, bring it in, tweak it. Nothing wrong with that. But when we've got the power of AI at our fingertips, let's get it to do all the hard work. So what I'll do is I've got some prompts ready to go. We're going to ask it to basically create something. So I'll read it out a little bit just so you understand what's happening. So I'll use ChatGPT. You could probably use any AI tool, but I'm just using this one. So my prompt is something like create an adaptive card using a valid schema, because it might not. So I'm just coercing the AI a little bit to do what I want. To create a visually interesting, medium-sized Windows 11 widget. It's not boring. With some emoji, just to make it look a bit more exciting. Based on the following content, I'm going to say describe using generative AI to create Windows widgets. I'm going to tell you about that. I've told it not to include any images because it can pull in random images from the internet, and I don't know what they'll be. So I've just reduced that risk a little bit. Then I've told it, don't return anything that isn't JSON, because it will do that. And any numbering or any markdown, because sometimes it does that. Now, this is live, this is real, I haven't pre-canned this, so I don't know what happened. Should hopefully work. So what we'll do is we'll wait for that to produce something. And we'll see what we've got there. Looks pretty valid, probably. So let's copy that, and we'll stick it in the designer, because as I said before, we can put anything in there. There we go. So we've got our widget there. It's a little bit big. Yeah, it's too long, isn't it? That's okay. Let's ask it then. Make this short. Now, well, that'd be interesting. It doesn't make it shorter text-wise or shorter the other way, but that's a bit smaller, isn't it? So we'll put that in there. There we go. It's way shorter, but you get the idea. I could keep tweaking that and see what that's like. But we could also see, it's like, what would be ideal is if I can see what that's actually like in the widgets board, because that's where it'll live. But there isn't really anything for Microsoft to do this, but there's always something you build yourself. So I've got this little widget. So what I can do is I can customize. Remember I was talking about customization before. This supports customization. And if I put customize in there, the top box, that's the adaptive card. Might not be able to see that, but what I'll do is I'll paste in what I just copied. I'll save it. And what I'll do is I'll show me what that widget looks like. So just all it's doing is outputting the adaptive card as is. That learn more button probably would actually open the link, but I'm not going to do that because otherwise it'll actually open there. But so again, so this is quite a handy thing, and the code for this is checked in for the demo for this talk, so you can totally try this out for yourself. But it just gives you the idea to see what a widget is actually like. So let's create a bit more of an interesting one. I'll do another one. So again, I'll switch to Copilot. Let's just do a random one. So here's another prompt. I'll just press enter and then that'll save a bit of time. So this is creating it again, very similar to the previous prompt. The only difference I said I've got it to say, describe the Microsoft MVP award and include colorful text with rich text block. So we've got something here. Looks quite long, but I'll just keep that because again, we can see what that would actually be like in the designer if we're not happy with it. So there it goes. It's quite a long one there. We'll just probably so we can see that there's a different rich text box. I'm reasonably happy with that. I could ask it to make that one shorter, but I'll just keep it as is just to see how long that possibly would be, and then we'll paste that in, just see what it looks like. I'll put it a larger size. It does fit. It fits in a larger size, so that would be a large widget. And again, and it's just generated itself. It's using emoji because I told it to. But again, it's very similar to the previous prompt. So you could use that as the basis of your widget generator. You get that bit in the middle, what it actually should contain. That could be different, but the bit saying how it should be structured, that can be the same. But that's what we can do. But as mentioned, widgets and adaptive cards support some clever features. So what I'll do is I'll go over to ChatGPT again. I'll hit enter, but I'll explain this prompt. Just go back up. So this prompt, again, I'm saying produce an adaptive card for a visually interesting widget again. That has a paragraph about Windows widgets where the visibility of the paragraph is toggled with a button called toggle. So I haven't told it how to do that. I've just told it that's what I want. I want a button that I can click. And from that, I'll hope it figures that out, what I want. So let's have a look. So let's copy this. And I'll put it in the designer just to make sure it's reasonably okay. Yep, so we got that, and it's slightly grayed out. Might be hard to see because that's a thing that'll be toggled. But is it though? Let's find out. So we'll go to our test widget, we'll customize it, and save that. And we've got our thing. What's missing? The paragraph. Do you think it'll work? Of course it works. So it's done that toggle visibility target element. I didn't tell it about target element or toggle visibility, but I told it I wanted a paragraph that could be toggled. It's figured that out for itself. So even if you didn't know what you wanted, just ask what you want. I want this button to do that, and as long as it's something that adaptive card can do, it'll probably work. Saves a lot of hassle, a lot of figuring out basically. And I'll do one last design. I'll switch back to Copilot. So this one is like, say you just want, someone's asked you, I need a widget. So this one's basically, say similar, create a visually interesting widget. And this is for a countdown widget. So I've asked it to use as many schema elements as possible. You could basically go to town, basically put as much in it because I want to really impress the boss with this widget. So I've said, just put everything in you could possibly think of, but it'll be for a countdown. Now, I don't know what this will be like. It might be interesting, but let's put it in Designer and see what it's done. So I've just asked it for the widget the boss wants. Okay, that's good. That's really good. So that's an event countdown. What event is that? Who knows? But that's enough. That's the basis. We could start using data binding to actually make that real. Let's put it in our test widget just to see what that's like. There we go. So we can show that to boss. There you go. Is that what you want the countdown widget look like? That's great. Can you make that just a little bit different? Fine. I can tweak that or ask the AI to do it. And then I can do the data binding. I can probably ask the AI to do that as well. So you can basically create these really nice things. I mean, that's great. I mean, that's fine. That's pretty much there. But I don't have to do any of the work. I don't have to build that JSON, all this complicated JSON that is probably produced, all of that. I don't have to write any of that. So it's just made that whole process so much easier, basically. But yeah, any questions about designing adaptive cards then? Yes.
What's the difference between Copilot and GPT? Are there any benefits to using one or the other?
For this, it's just to show you could use more than one. There's no real disadvantage. I mean, if you're super biased, you'd be like a Microsoft, yeah, do use my. But I'm just proving that you could. I mean, I could do a different one again, but I haven't done that, so I don't know what it would do. But yeah, it could be your favorite AI tool of choice. So it'd probably be fine. So anything you want, if you've got a favorite AI tool, these prompts will also be in the demo as code as well. So you can try these prompts out for yourself. Show me what it does. I'd be interested to see what other AI tools. But yeah, whatever AI tool takes you fancy, try it with those. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what kind of results it produces. But yeah, it doesn't matter. It's just for the sake of showing that you could use more than one.
So no to use your SDK.
No, because this is just the design side. So theoretically, I suppose you could get if I told it to generate the code for a widget provider, that could it would have to know more about my thing. In theory, yeah, but I'd need to probably expose that more as a deliberate thing. But yeah, that would be an interesting use case actually. I think if you did ask it, it would probably use the normal stuff that Microsoft have already publicized. But that's an interest. That's a good question actually. Yeah. Perfect. I'll show one more thing, and then we'll switch to the. So I'll put in just to get across here. So I'll switch back to Copilot. Again, could be your favorite tool of choice. And this one, very similar to the other prompts, but I've told it to use data binding this time. So I've said, create a visually interesting widget with a single button called refresh that uses data binding with $signs for fields. Now I have to tell it how data binding works because it doesn't quite get it right. I've told it to use this endpoint, and I've told it what kind of data it returns. This is a catfax endpoint. And I've told it again not to return anything it shouldn't. So this will produce hopefully something that will do that. So just scroll down. So I'll just copy that and put that into the designer. It's put extra junk in there, which is why it sometimes does do that. So there we go. So, but it doesn't say what the cat fact is because it's using data binding and it's expecting the data that would come from the API. So if I do this and give it this one, it might work. They might have done it wrong. That's fair enough. It does happen. Sometimes it doesn't quite do it right. So it hasn't quite got the data binding right, but yeah, generally that should work, but never mind. But that's the benefit of AI sometimes. But again, I could tweak it, get it to generate again, and it's probably just a matter of getting it to do that again. But again, it's the layout that I was interested in, and I can tweak the data binding if need be. So that's that's what we need for those. So what we'll do is I'll show you how you develop them. So we've got our design widget. So if you're curious about what's behind the actual design widget I've been showing off, this is it. So we've got, this is a Windows App SDK application, just like any other. So it's got, if you've ever seen one before, it's the same structure. It does have a main window. I'm not using it, but this could be a companion widget. So you'd still have your main window, but I've just left it there for completeness. But we could also have multiple widgets as well. You can have more than one. But what we generally have is we have some assets, just like you would in a normal application. And that could be our templates. I've just got a default template. So when I started up the widget, this is what you see. It just says Generative AI, creates new content. In fact, if I go to it and reset it, that's what you see. So that template is basically this one. When I click configure, it swaps to this template. So again, it's just another adaptive card, which has got some inputs on it. It's got the template text that I type in, and it's got the data for the data binding as well. This is a pretty simple widget, so all it does is swap between those two and outputs the actual content that I've typed in. So nothing too complicated. So I'll show the other one instead. So this is a different widget. So if you spotted, there was two widgets. So what I'll do is I'll try that out. So in this widget, this one's called a prompt widget. So what does this do? So if I do customize, it's got some of the options here. So it's got an endpoint. This is what the top box is, and it's got a prompt. And I can also, and I've also got a drop down, which has got three options. It's got Azure OpenAI service, GitHub models, and OpenAI. Those were the services I mentioned before that we can leverage. So we can actually leverage the models directly inside our application. So we could, but this application is a bit cleverer than just the prompts we were putting in before because it has all that behavior in it. So if I say, all I'm pasting in is a basic prompt, describe using generative AI to create Windows widgets, very much like I did before. We'll choose GitHub model. So what this should hopefully do is this will go off, use the GitHub model for, this is GPT-4o, and it's going to return the actual adapter card straight away without having to do anything. But what we can also do is if I go, there's the other option. So we really wanted to see those cat facts. We were missing those. So let's go and have a look. So I've got so all I've done is I pasted the endpoint in, and I'll just get rid of this just so I'll reset it actually just so it's completely reset. So there's no smoke and mirrors. So we're pasting that. So just pasting the URL, nothing else. And we'll pick, hey, we'll pick the Azure OpenAI service because I got to pay for this one. So it's like 0.001 pence every time I click it. So we'll have to click it a few times. There we go. We got a cat widget and it works. Among many, the cat's one, maybe that's not the best one. Let's refresh it. So there we go. So now it says a different one. So in 1887, cats overtook dogs as the #1 pet in America. But yeah, that refresh button works. So it actually does refresh the data, but not the whole widget. It's just refreshing the data. But I'll show how that's done when I go back to code. So we can actually see our cat facts. We didn't miss out after all. But this supports the same sort of things that the other widget was doing. So let's do customize widget, reset it, and we'll switch to this prompt. This prompt is that same thing with paragraph. Paragraph about Windows widgets where the visibility of the paragraph is toggled. And we'll do, what should we do? This one, just OpenAI. So I'll use that one. Again, that's a paid one. Again, about 0.01 pence every time I do it. So there we go. We've got a toggle button. We've got a little pin icon. Didn't ask for that. And it works. So it's doing the same thing as the previous widget. Obviously, all the content is entirely down to it. I just told it I wanted that button. It added the little pin widget, pin emoji all by itself. So again, this one's a bit cleverer. So again, we've got our configuration screen. So we've got the box at the top. We've got that defined as just a text input. We've got our choices. So that drop down, these are the different choices, which is just setting a value. It's an enum value I'm going to be using later. And we've also got some actions as well. So when I click save, it'll send that action through that we saw before in the spec where we can basically see actions that have been invoked. I invoke the save action that sends a save verb. So I know to handle that, and I'll show you the code for that in a second. And we've also got an error. So if something went wrong, it would actually show an error message. So there's some extra things in this just to make it a little bit safer, and I'll show those. So we'll go through the widget itself first. So hopefully you can read that at the back. but I'll explain some bits as we go along. So just got some constants to define our different verbs. You could support any number of them if you wanted to. I've just got the 3 here. I've got my templates as well, so they're just embedded assets, just like in a normal Windows App SDK application. I've got some helpers. Those are provided with my package, so that just makes loading the JSON a bit easier, so you don't have to write that yourself. So what we've got here is we've got our default model. So when I click reset, it just puts everything to default, nothing too sophisticated there. We've got loads. So basically, I'm just serializing the actual values to storage, to local storage. So when the widget loads up again, even after a reset, it'll be the same widget. It'll stay exactly the same. And save is obviously its counterpart. When I click save, I'm just serializing that information into data. Update. So when I want to update the widget, I just call this method and I'm passing in the data. So if I wanted to update the data, that data value can be set. That would be any JSON data you like. The template, that's the actual adaptive card. There's a third one for a custom state. So if you want to store a state value, you can do that. And that can be then rehydrated into your widgets. That might be a particular action or something you might want to have a state set. And then you just call this method, which is exposed from my SDK, and that just makes it easier to interact with the widgets. We've got a constructor. We're actually taking advantage of dependency injection here a little bit, but you could do whatever you wanted. Basically, again, we load that initial state. So we load from the JSON. So the configuration of this widget is stored in storage. So we just load that out. We have a definition ID. So all widgets have to have a name. This one's called prompt widget. So it can just be the name of itself. It's configurable. So I've got a Boolean for its configuration. And then we've got this on action invoked. So when I click that button, save, then I'm going to get to this case statement, save, and any verbs that I support. So for save, this is the save code. I basically get the JSON from the configuration. So when I click submit, I'll get an event with a JSON payload in it. I can serialize that back to my model because it's the same. And then I can do whatever I want with it. I can check if there's been any errors. So if there's something went wrong with the AI, I would get an error. And then if there is an error, I can display that. If everything went fine, which it actually did, which is great, I basically get those values from the configuration screen, if you like, and then I save it and then I update it and I set the configuration back the other way so it doesn't stay in the configuration state. We also have a reset option. When I was resetting it, that's all it's doing, just setting it to default. The design widget, exactly the same. And close just updates the widget to swap it back to the template. So that's not doing anything at all, but swapping the template from one to the other, which I'm just doing with that configuration value. You'll see how I do that in a second. And the default one, which is the refresh, right? So all I've done is said, if you get any other verb, just get the data and reload it again. So when I click on that refresh button, that's because it doesn't have a verb, it falls into there and that's just handling that. So any verb that the AI decides to make up, it'll go in there. So it'll just reload the widget basically. And it's also the default state as well. The customization requested, pretty simple. I just set the configuration on, that's it. For the data for the widget, so I've got this inline if statement. So if configuration is on, I load the configuration data. If it's off, I load the normal data or the default data as a fallback if it doesn't work, because we're all good developers here. We can't assume that the data will come back, so we'll switch to the default template. And the same for the template as well. We'll switch back. So again, we swap between the two. So if config is true, we get one side. If it's false, we get the other. So really simple. But this is, your widget, all your widget code could be here. But obviously, this is a bit of a cleverer widget. So it's taking advantage of AI. So we've got widget provider class. So this is tiny, but in the actual normal way of implementing widgets, if you follow the Microsoft one, this is a massive class. Absolutely huge. But the most important thing is this GUID. That's it. That GUID is the most important thing. And that just has to be in 3 places. This is one of them, and I'll show the other 2. And you implement this base class, widget provider base, and that's hiding all the complicated, difficult to understand stuff away from you. So yeah, you don't get caught up in all of that kind of stuff. You just do this, and that's all you need. We've also got a file provider just to handle the file system, so you could store any files. This is just storing it in local storage, but it's just got storage file, usual stuff. Don't really need to show that. What we want to see is the AI stuff. So in this library, we've got our prompt provider. So this is basically injecting in some configuration. So that's just the API keys. I will not show those, obviously, but I've just got some settings. I can show an example one that I hopefully will click on, which has got the different keys. So it's just the 3 keys that just blanked out here for that reason. And then I've got the settings. So in the settings, I've got different. So for the different, so when I put the URL in, that is the data prompt. And when I didn't and put the text in, that is the card prompt. And I'll just bump that up a little bit more. And it's basically exactly the same prompts I was using. Create an adaptive card using a valid for a visually interesting. So this is the same. So I can test those prompts in ChatGPT or your favorite AI of choice. I don't even have to write any code. I just took the same. So I could use a system prompt to do this. I could tell the system prompt to behave in a certain way. But this way, it means you can fully test these prompts. You can get the prompt just refined. And then all you need to do, like refresh user data binding a $ for fields using there. Right now, that's the bit I put in. So I put in the endpoint. When I type the endpoint in, it's just putting it in there, 0. That returns this data. Blah, blah, do return any data. So it's the same prompt as I used earlier. For the other one, again, it's the same, pretty much the same all the way along. Based on the following content, 0. So when it was the text, the freeform text, like talk about MVP, to make the paragraph toggle, just puts it in there. So it's the same exact prompt that I was putting in the other one. So it makes it a lot easier. You can test that easily, and I'm telling you, don't return any images, just like I said before. Retry is interesting. So what will happen is if it doesn't quite work, it'll do it multiple times. And I'll show that. And then we've got the configuration, we've got the endpoints. These are okay to share because they're definitely locked down, but I won't scroll along too much just in case. We've got the model, GPT-4o, but it could be any of the OpenAI models that are supported. It could be the latest, greatest, whatever you like. GitHub config is the same. In fact, it is the same code. It's the same version of the abstractions I talked about earlier. The endpoint is always that for GitHub models. OpenAI, because OpenAI is just OpenAI, so I have to tell it which endpoint, but it could actually, if your provider fulfills the OpenAI spec, you could put an endpoint in if you wanted. So that is supported if you want it. So that configuration gets loaded into here. And we have our retry policy. So this is that retries value. So basically keep doing it over and over again. Why would it do it over again? What happens if it didn't return valid JSON? So I just returned the markup or something extra that I don't want. So I've just got a simple thing to check if it's valid JSON. I just do a JSON document parse. That fails. It'll throw an exception. I know it's not JSON. Try again. And obviously, I don't want it to try infinitely, so hence the 4 retries. Is it a valid adaptive card? Because it could be valid JSON, but that JSON could be complete rubbish. So what I do is I use another library, which Microsoft wrote, which is for adaptive cards. And all I say is load it from the JSON. I'm being pretty strict here. If there's any warnings, I kind of can treat that as an error if I wanted to, but I could just ignore them. Warnings are just unsupported things that potentially are in the card, but might not cause a problem. But here I'm like, yeah, they might be a problem. So here I'm ignoring them. So I'm just saying if there are warnings, just tell me them so I can make that. So in that error message box, say it puts something random in from the Teams users. That warning would probably show that, but it might still work. But if it's completely invalid, I treat it as invalid and I pop out a message. So if it was invalid for a particular reason, that's what the message would say. And there's an exception for that. For the endpoint, I just check if it's a valid endpoint because again, the user could type in anything in there and I just cast it to a URI. I then send a head request just to make sure the actual URI is actually there. So I'm doing a double check. Is it a valid URI and is it actually there? But you don't have to do that. That's just extra checking. And then I've just got some methods to load the JSON, which we would check to see if it's valid. And then we've got different prompts here. So for GitHub and OpenAI, they're different. So we've got these different methods, these get ones, and I'll show you those in a sec. And then the other one is the Azure one. And then we've got some methods to get the data. Again, get the data, just loads the data from the endpoint. And we can fetch that. We check if it's valid, we get the data. We've got the model, which is loading in from the configuration screen. So we've got the different types of prompt. That's the enum. So between the 3 different ones, if I supported more providers, I could support an infinite number potentially. Then it could obviously support different ones. So it checks to see if it's not empty, because we check if it's valid, and then if it's successful, we basically will request it, check if it's valid, we'll get it, check it. If everything's okay, it worked. Now, luckily, it worked every single time, so it's fine. But if it did fail, it would keep trying those 4 times until it actually succeeds. Otherwise, if it fails catastrophically, it would produce an error. And I'll show you the different types of code. So to actually use the the Microsoft extension site, yeah, this is pretty much it. So I basically new up a chat completions client. I give it the URI, that is the endpoint. I give it my API key, and I tell it I want as a chat client. The model is from the configuration, so that model could be any model. And this is the GitHub one. It's exactly the same as the Azure one, so just inherits it. And the OpenAI one is like this. Now there is a base prompt because they're all very similar. And this is it. So basically, does this baby? It's like 5 or 6 lines of code, and you're there. I've just surrounded it with lots of checks to ensure that it comes back fine. But I think if I took them all out, it'd probably still work because it's pretty reliable. But yeah, with those few lines of code, you can interact with these AI models very, very simply. Not much to it. I've just added exception handling, but really it would be 5 lines of code. Nothing too complicated at all. Not sure what and there's the enum if you're just curious with the different types there. I've also got some unit tests as well, because why not? I've got to make sure these things work. So I wrote some unit tests that just check again. It uses the same settings and the secret settings I won't show. But yeah, so that basically allows you to use those AI models. And of course, they could be from other providers. They don't have to be OpenAI models. There could be any. Of course, your mileage may vary about what it might do. But the benefit of those validation steps, we know we're going to get a valid adaptive card at the end of the day. So you could have a completely dynamic adaptive card for your application. But if you get one you like, you could then store it, so you could build any experience. And these libraries can be used in any .NET application. It doesn't have to be a Windows App SDK application. It could be any .NET application you like. But yeah, the package is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. If I've got time, I could show some of the code for that if you want to get scared by COM. But any questions at this point about the implementation? Yes.
Given that it's AI and given that it's going to be
yeah, they're pretty basic. I'll go on then. I'll show you. So I've got they're doing pretty basic stuff just to see if it comes back with anything. I'm pretty being fast and loose. I've got like tell me a joke. I'm just checking to see if a joke comes back. It is always the same joke. It's that's I mean I will tell you it is, and then let's see it is. So when I run it through the 3 models, it's always the skeleton joke about a skeleton. So that's all right then. Let's risk it. Let's debug it so we can actually see the value it comes back. So I'm just testing it's not null. So but if I can say it's always guaranteed to be the skeleton joke, I should be checking, does it contain the word skeleton? Because it probably does. So this will run through, use my settings, hit the message. It's the skeleton joke. So I'll put this so you can see the whole thing. So I got, sure, here's a light joke. Why don't skeletons fight each other? Because they don't have the guts. So that's the first one. So if we do the next one, I'll run that same test again. And look, sure, here's for me. Why don't skeletons fight each other? So it's this, so I'm hitting, although it's the same model, right? It's still GPT-4o, but those are on different services. So the first one was Azure, second one was GitHub Models, and they responded with the same joke. And if I do the third one, hopefully third time's the charm. Yeah, so it's the same joke. Why don't skeletons fight each other? They don't have to guess. So it's the same, even though it's the same model, but it's 3 completely different providers. So that shows there's some predictability there. When I ran those tests, I was like, oh, maybe it can do this reliably. And the other tests are just to see if it'll then return a widget. So it's got the test for the catfax one. So I'll see that it'll actually come back with one, and that's that one, fun one. Celebrate me becoming a Microsoft MVP, because when I wrote this test, that just happened. So yeah, so I've got some tests there, but they're pretty basic. They're just null check ones. They're not nothing. But yeah, it's quite funny to see it do the same thing each time, which gave me confidence because I tried it out in Copilot first and ChatGPT. I thought, well, can I just use these abstractions and do it myself? So that's where that came from. Yes.
With the adaptive widgets, being able to get it to display on the taskbar like the web ones.
No, the weather one's the only one that gets to do that at the moment. So there's no that the weather one's like the special one, so it gets that privilege, but it's not open to third parties. So and widgets currently only display here. They don't get displayed on the desktop. It's possible they can be displayed in other places because because actually the adaptive cards platform has renderers as well. Like there's like JavaScript ones and stuff like that. So in theory, a widget could appear anywhere in Windows, but at the moment they're only available there, but they don't have access to this. They can do things like notifications though. So the notification area, anything else in Windows they can do. So if you want to pop a toast notification, you can totally do that. That wouldn't be a problem. But yeah, you don't have the ability to put something here. It's either the weather or if you're offline, it's the widgets icon. But yeah, you don't get to do that, unfortunately. Would be nice though, but it's not an option, unfortunately. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, of that operating systems, what are their uses for adaptive cards?
Yes, you can use them in Teams, so you can have them like Teams conversations. So for example, if you wanted to have a flight booking system for or something like that for your employees, you could implement that with these cards, and they would look exactly the same. And that way, it could be extended a widget. So if they say, you know, that thing in Teams is really useful, but what would be better if it was a widget? You can just use exactly the same card and expose it in a widget provider, implement that same functionality, and it's built into Windows. And these widgets are installed just like a normal application. So you can either get them from the Windows Store, or you can install them with an AppX installer, MSIX. No different from a normal Windows application. The one thing I forgot to show, because you just reminded me, thank you very much, is there's some manifest changes you need to make that support that. That GUID I told everyone about. So I have to go to designer first because of just the way this works. But if I show you the the manifest, so there's that GUID, that magic GUID. So it's just whatever. So when you create a new Windows App SDK application, you just get assigned a GUID. Just use that one. There's then phone identity. What's that for? And then you've got like the name of the widget. So that's the name of the application. So that's normal. So all of this is if you've done any Windows App SDK before, this is all pretty normal. This is a bit of an unusual one. So this one tells app list entry, tells it not to show up in the start menu because it doesn't make sense. So if this is a self-contained widget. So if it showed up in the start menu, someone would go click on it and it'd be like nothing's happened. So it would because you wouldn't see anything. So I can tell it not to show up. So you can do a widget just, or you can do a companion. Companion ones are a bit more interesting because your application gets launched twice. So the widgets board will invoke your application, which you'll see why it does that in a second. And then your application will launch. So when the user launches your application, the one you can see, the widgets board will also have launched one in the background. So if you want to make those work together, you have to do some inter-process communication, but it's totally possible. I've done this, so it does work. But yeah, it's just the usual stuff. Whatever you want to you can communicate between widget and app if needed, but it's just a self-contained one. Got the display name. These are all normal for Windows App SDK application, but then we start going into things that sound complicated. So it's a COM server. So this application's a COM server because that's what a widget really is from Windows' point of view, a widget provider anyway. We have the executable. We have that GUID again. So so Windows knows to invoke your application using the native Windows APIs. This is where it starts to get a little complicated, but it's not too bad. It's just these things. We tell it what its display name is. This is then another section where we define the widget itself. So its display name in the widgets board. We've got various assets, so we can have an icon. We've got that GUID again. So it's in a few places, more than 3, fair enough. But we've got the definition of it. We can say its capabilities. So it's small, medium, and large in this case, but I could just support any of those. I can support small and large if I support, or medium on its own. You can also support different theme resources. These theme resources can be themed and localized. So you could have different language versions of your screenshots and different themes. So you can have a dark and light theme ones for some of the assets, and the same for the screenshots. There's just some placeholders for them here, but you can fill that out. So with these changes to the manifest, which is just a bit of XML. You paste it in. That will then turn your application into a widget provider alongside the code as well. So yeah, but that it's not too difficult to make those changes. That's the most you have to do with other than building your widget is put this in, and that will then make Windows aware that your application has a widget. So for example, there's the timer application in Windows has widgets. It will have something like this. It'll have its own application, but it also exposes widgets as well. But you can totally just write a self-contained widget. That's what these are. They're completely self-contained. They have that main window just because I didn't remove it, so it shows it's just a vanilla one. And to actually start it up, you just make some small changes. So there's some dependency injection stuff in here because I had a dependency injection. But here's the method to register the widget provider. So when I mentioned the add widget, I just add the widget. There's the widget, prompt widget. And then new it up. I've passed in the services that I just have to resolve them first because I can't use dependency injection with this class directly. So I'm just doing it indirectly. And then I register it. And that tells the system, here's a widget. And you can add as many as you like. You could have multiple widgets. These are just singular widgets in an application, but you could have as many as you like. And you just keep adding them. So you'd add 5 or 6. I've tried 2 myself, for example, and then there's just stuff. So there's not much to it, and all the code is online, and you can check that out. Anything else?
I assume that you say there must be a timer. You can respond on a tick. There'll be a tick event, you can do something.
Yeah, you could implement yourself. So you could implement your own updates if you wanted. So if you wanted to do like a real time, say that CatFax one, we wanted to refresh it ourselves, you would just implement that timer yourself and call update. So it doesn't pull your application, it just starts it. So the widgets board will invoke your application and that's it. It just sits open and then it's up to you to do something in the background. But you can check for those events so you can stop the loop when it's deactivated because you don't need to do that. So you can get the activate event, start your loop up and start refreshing. As soon as it deactivates, they're not seeing the board anymore, you can deactivate. So you can respond to those events and turn that loop off. But you do have to do that yourself. But it would just be a loop of your own and you can update normally. But yeah, do I have time to show the scary stuff? Or yeah, all right then. So what I'll do is I'll show the the actual code. So I've took the code from Microsoft that they wrote and have put this in. It's under the same license, so theirs is MIT licensed, so is this library. And we've got some scary stuff already. So we've got one of the classes loading here. So we've got like Microsoft, so it's just taken straight from Microsoft. We've got some numbers. What do they mean? Who knows? So all this kind of stuff, this is all, and we've got this attribute because we have to tell it certain things. It's not can't trim this, sorry, because it's native. It'll start removing these methods and it won't work anymore. So we've got all this kind of create instance. What's this? Marshalling. I mean, if you know native Windows API stuff, you'll be like, oh, right, I know what you mean now. All this weird, complicated stuff looks way too complicated, but it's all here, so you don't have to worry about it. So we've got that one. I've got a widget registration manager, lots of weird com stuff going on here, registering classes, doing all sorts of not normal .NET stuff, basically. It's even got do not change this, kind of just leave it alone, it works, don't worry about it. I've got the helper, that's where those JSON things, it's just some methods to make loading the stuff easier. We've got our widget provider base. So that is the base. So that you remember that one had the tiny GUID, and that was it. This is the part that you would have to write. So we said com visible, so we have to do things like that because this is com now. So in com land, and we've got all this kind of recover the widgets, so we can load the widgets that were maybe already running. Loads of complicated stuff going on there. Just all this code you're expected to do yourself. If you weren't using this library, this is all the stuff. I won't show it all, but you've got all this kind of crazy find the widgets that are running. To update a widget, that's actually how you do it. You have to activate them, do all this complicated stuff. Nobody's got time for that. And yeah, just hides all this stuff away. There's these random GUIDs, unknown, all this kind of stuff. Class object, again, it's not compatible with trimming because there we go, DLL. There's some very scary native DLLs being invoked, OLA32 being actually invoked. This is invoking low-level COM. This is too complicated. I don't want to do this. So this should all be abstracted away anyway, to be honest. But when I started out writing a widget, this is what I had to deal with, and I spent days and days just going, "This is awful." It works, but it's so I just thought I'll just hide it away for the rest of the year. So, but yeah, that's a free package. It's got there's other features in that as well in this SDK. I just added it to that same one, but we've got just complex stuff that's just not worth worrying about. But again, it just to make your life easier. A few lines of code, you can get going. This just hides it all away from you. Anything else before I get to summary? Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. You can't see the widget in the widgets board. So, but you could write your application. So like those unit tests, you could build the functionality of your application that and basically test that. So you could basically kind of build the widget and it outputs the adapter. You'd have to debug it basically, but you'd have to do it outside of a widget class. You could say write I don't know, web application or something like that, and have it output the stuff. But yeah, the online requirements, the widgets board itself. But so if you are offline, you can still do the coding. But if you want to test anything, if you want to run it, you'll have to just run it to output the actual raw JSON itself or whatever your application is going to do. You won't be able to see the actual widget because the widgets board comes up with a message just saying like something like I don't work if I'm offline. There's no way around that. But you could easily test the cards in the designer to see if they look right, and you could test your functionality in a test harness or a test application that doesn't use, and then you can just wrap that code in the actual widget itself. So once you're happy, great, you pop yourself online, test it, works. So you could do most of it, but you wouldn't be able to see it in the widgets board, unfortunately. That's the only problem with that. Yes.
Well, if it's okay, so on desktop apps, when you run your Sony executive runs on your own system, how can it be adapted to use in an environment or I mean in an organization through intranet?
Yeah, because you can just use a conventional installer. So the same as normal Windows applications. You can basically have an MSIX package. So you can basically distribute that to employees. So however you distribute, if you were writing your own internal Windows applications, you just distribute it exactly the same way. It's a modern Windows application anyway. So if you're using Windows App SDK now, which is what you need to use to write a modern application, it's what the new Apple apps, so like Apple Music and that's Windows App SDK. So all the newer apps use that platform, and they can either be distributed through the store publicly, or you can have an installer that you can provide to your employees, just like any other installer, and it'll install it just like a normal application. The installation process is exactly the same, but what it installs is a widget. So it doesn't get immediately added to the board. They have to add it themselves, but you can distribute it just like any other Windows application. Give them the installer, they run it, it installs the widget, then they can add it to their board or not. But yeah, that's how it's done. So it's the same process for any modern Windows application, basically. But internally, yeah, you could whatever process you've got will work just fine if it's a modern Windows app. Yeah, perfect. Right. The AI was well behaved today, which is always good. Right. So I'll just summarize. So widgets in Windows 11, they provide an easy to use and at a glance information. There's built-in ones that you can leverage, third-party ones, and of course you can now write your own. They're actually designed using adaptive cards. You can store how you can create those. You can use the drag and drop designer. You can use the schema, or you can just make it a lot easier and just ask generative AI, whatever you prefer, to do it for you. To actually implement a widget provider, you can use Windows App SDK and make it a bit easier with my package, commences.toolkit.windows app SDK. And those widgets can take advantage of any functionality that .NET offers. That includes generative AI, like we saw, but it could be any functionality that's supported in both Windows App SDK and .NET. You can take advantage of in your applications in a widget, or build a companion application if you wanted. And generative AI itself, that can create content for anything. It doesn't have to be just widgets. You can integrate it into any .NET application. So you want to line up your .NET application in just a few lines of code. That's what Microsoft.extensions.ai does. And there's going to be more implementations as we go on, but it's so easy to use. I mean, most of the code I added was just error handling. It's a few lines of code, little bit of configuration, and you don't have to pay for it. You can use GitHub models. If you've got a GitHub account, you can use GitHub models. Costs you nothing. There's a rate limit. It's like 100 or so, depending on which model you use. But that's enough again when you're developing to get started, get something going, and then you can use something like Azure or OpenAI services directly. And again, the cost is pretty minimal. I mean, the cost tonight is probably not even a penny I've probably spent today. So yeah, not too difficult at all. So I've got time for any more questions, or we've got the links, which are a bit hard to see, but all the main stuff is on my GitHub repository. So if you go github.com/rogue planetoid, you'll see the repository design develop Windows widgets that has all the code. So both the demos for the design and the prompt one, and the prompts as well, and some examples of some output as well if it didn't work. So you can try those prompts out. Just try them in ChatGPT or OpenAI, or whatever you use. Be interesting to see what other AI platforms generate. Maybe they produce more visually interesting ones. Maybe they do something completely different. So yeah, that's it.